All life is interrelated. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. We are tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. You can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. These were the words of Martin Luther King Jr. Welcome to Nahashan Kimemia Live. A special shout out to Gladys H for suggesting this topic. Gladys suggested it through Facebook. Suggest a topic, comment below the video, or send me an inbox. Thank you to all my 1,143 subscribers. Please subscribe to my channel and share my videos. Do not hide a light where there is darkness. You can ask questions during the live show. Please ask me a question in the comment sections below. Chris Kirubi, the rise to power. Chris Kirubi was born in a poor family in 1941. The exact date of his birth unknown. He is 78 years old. Both of his parents, they died when he was very young. He began work during school holidays to support himself and his siblings. He had one pair of shoes during most of his school life, and I'm thinking this one is mostly high school. He used them on Sundays as he went to church, so he didn't use them regularly. And he was comfortable when he was in school. That's one of the principal arguments for boarding schools, that when you are in school, you don't have so much to worry so much about poverty, about what is happening at home. Perhaps there are fights at home. Perhaps you guys are hungry at home. You just focus on your education. And that is what gave Chris Kirubi comfort when he was young. School. And I noticed something as I was researching about his past life. There is no talk about uncles. There is no talk about his aunties. So I asked, why? Was there something wrong? Is he being unappreciative by not mentioning them? Is he trying to shield them from the people by not mentioning them, the public? Did they have a positive impact on his life? Did they have a negative impact on his life? When it comes to you, and when you finally make it, or if you have made it, how would you talk of the others, of your extended family, or even of your immediate family? Will you speak of them joyfully? Will you speak of them with shame? Will you speak of them with a lot of hurt in your heart? Or you will speak of them with a lot of joy in your heart? I did a video on the Kenyan family. Please watch it. So upon graduation, his first job was as a salesman, selling and repairing gas cylinders for Shell. I know many people have started as market executives or sales representatives, right? Perhaps your future is still bright, and it's hard work, especially for those guys who sell insurance. It's hard work. So he worked for several years at a company called Kenacto. He did that in the 1960s and the early 70s. At that time, he was in his 20s. So I just want to focus on Kenacto a bit. Just that a bit. You can see its logo at the back. But it wasn't this way in the back in the day. Kenya National Transport Cooperative Society. It started in 1965 by a guy, his name was Simon Peter Mbashia. I hope I pronounced it correctly. It started out as a cooperative transport society, like the circles that we're trying to do with matatus today. And this guy, he had a dream of 155 vehicles on the road. And those 155 vehicles, there would be 49 taxis, 62 buses and 44 lorries. Dream big. So he applied to operate 82 buses, but the government gave him a license of only 2 vehicles. So you can dream big, but the government can shatter your dream. But he didn't give up. He continued. He acquired a petrol station and he leased another petrol station, and 4 months later the license was withdrawn. No reason was given. So this entrepreneur, he's starting up a transport society, a cooperative transport society. But people are pulling him down. And guess what, those people? The government. Don't worry, Chris Kirubi is going to feature just in a moment, right? And in June 1966, government deferred applications for a road license for all their buses. And remember, you had big dreams, 82 buses. You acquired a petrol station, you leased another one. With whose money? This was cash on loan. And the government is withdrawing a license. The government is deferring applications for other licenses, and no reason is being given. This is the life of an entrepreneur, the life that Chris Kirubi is about to enter, because he's still working as a sales representative. So on October 1966, the government announced that Kenacto, the guys that they had withdrawn their licenses, the guys that they had deferred their applications, they were unable to repay their debts. Is it a surprise? And so the government nationalized that company, that transport society. And people are wondering, why is the government oppressing its people, businessmen, entrepreneurs? And the rumors were that the government was trying to protect foreign competitors. And guess who these competitors were? Kenya Bus Services. And another company, again a foreigner from Britain, it was called Overseas Trading Company, or simply OTC. OTC started in 1930s, and it had a fleet of 13 buses and they were on 12 routes around the city. So these foreign companies, they had a head start. But that didn't deter entrepreneurs in Kenya. The government was the final straw that put a death to their dreams, that killed their dreams. And so what happened? Kenacto was given to Kenneth Matiba. You remember Kenneth Matiba? He was a PS in the Ministry of Commerce, and he succeeded. He built the company and it started flourishing. And then the government hired expatriates, 19 of them. And one of them was a guy called Mr. Spencer. And the company started falling. So again, foreigners benefiting, our entrepreneurs and our companies going down. Even the ones that have been nationalized by the government. So in the 1970s, here's where Chris Kirubi comes in. Kenacto got 2 general managers. One of them, John Gitao. And the other one, Chris Kirubi. And guess what happened to Kenacto? After you had let go of the foreigners, after the indigenous people had taken over, the haulage business, that's a part of Kenacto, it flourished. And the taxi business flourished. And you can see the taxi business is going on until today. And that was at the time of who? Chris Kirubi. And then what happened? It flourished so much that the Mercedes-Benz became a symbol of Kenacto. But then again, tragedy struck. In 1977, Tanzania closed its border with Kenya. Zambia closed its the Zambian business that Kenacto was doing also collapsed. And this will bring a lot of revenue to Kenacto. But Chris Kirubi did not despair. So what he did, he negotiated with Ugandans to transport their coffee via Kenacto. And most of the coffee at that time, right, Uganda was sending most of its coffee through the railways, and people are stealing. So stealing began a long time ago, even before SGR. Uganda was sending thousands of tons of coffee to the port of Mombasa. And Chris Kirubi had the idea that instead of railways, use our transport facilities. But then, two MPs, Muhuri Mushiri and Mwangi Gachago, they stole coffee from one of the lorries, ferrying this coffee. And guess what Chris Kirubi did? He had them arrested. So he started from way back. And it can tell you that by this time he had gained a lot of power to have MPs arrested. Again, it can tell you that the government frustrating the people through the licenses, giving licenses and actually studying whether the license is worthwhile. That's in case of deferment. And then now in this case, through the politicians actually doing criminal activity. We frustrate ourselves for the benefit of who? Foreigners. Like right now, who's benefiting from the loans that we're getting? China. Israel has also benefited. Macron will be in the country in just a few days, I think on Wednesday, and he'll also benefit. Okay, back to Chris Kirubi. So what he did, he said then, we will transport that coffee because you don't want to lose business. Tanzania, there's a problem. Zambia, there's a problem. We have Uganda, and they have coffee that they need to move to the port of Mombasa. Now we'll transport them under police guard. So he did all of these things, but yet some people blame him for the collapse of Kenacto. So Chris Kirubi says, go and look at the records. I left a very healthy balance sheet. He actually says 50 Mercedes-Benz saloon cars and 25 Mercedes trucks. And he also left big, viable contracts. Based on what I've studied, he really did well at Kenacto. His beginning was humble, and his move in the public sector, it was commendable because he did a lot, in my opinion. But then, I think he had felt the frustrations of government, and he had become powerful enough, and now he wanted to move into the private sector. I'm guessing he didn't want to have any more MPs arrested, and he took a leap into the private sector. And for those guys who want to take a leap from employment to the private sector, Chris Kirubi has some advice. This is what he says: work while you are employed as if it is your company. If you try and cheat the employer, you are cheating yourself. And that's a thing that I've seen with most people, and that's a reason why most businesses fail. You hire somebody, that person steals from you, you close the business, that person is unemployed, you don't have a business, you try another one, and you keep doing that until at the end of the day, you just put that money in the bank or you buy some land. So it never really trickles down as fast as it should. We are our own enemies. That is what I'm trying to say. So when he was around 30 years old, right, he was still at Kenacto because he was making moves way into the mid 1970s, but he had already started venturing into the private sector because he had begun buying rundown buildings. He bought them in Nairobi and in Mombasa. He renovated them and then sold them or rented them out. Something akin to what Donald Trump does in America. And then he also started acquiring strategic pieces of land in and around Nairobi. Posh places. He would erect rental residential or commercial properties. And this guy says, because I got this from Forbes, that he used loans from Kenyan financial institutions. Basically, I think what the silent statement that they're making is that he did not steal from Kenacto or from other government bodies. I wish I knew what was happening at Kenacto. There's some other stuff that happened. But thus far, I don't find any evidence that Chris Kirubi did wrong stuff over there. Back to his education. He is a graduate of the Harvard Business School. He went there, I think, for 3 years. Based on what he says, he actually has a position at Harvard today where he advises the Harvard president on certain matters. I'm not really sure what, but he has that. And then he seems to have studied at Handels University or something. So that is what I have when it comes to Chris Kirubi and the rise to power. I hope that it inspires you and it gives you an idea of what the man is. Now let's move into the money, because that's where it's at, right? So that's Harvard Business School, and that is the growth in terms of money. So how wealthy is Chris Kirubi? He is a non-executive director at Bayer East Africa Limited, right? I'll talk about that in a moment. He's a director at Centium Investments. I'll talk about that in a moment. He serves as the chairman of the following companies, not company: DHL Express Kenya Limited, Kiruma International Kenya Limited, International House Limited, Nairobi Bottlers Limited, Sandvik East Africa Limited, 98.4 Capital FM, Hako Industries Kenya Limited. So I can't go into all of these companies, of course. We don't have a lot of time, right? But I can mention a few of them. So let me start with the first one, 98.4 Capital FM. Now this company, it got started in 1996 after Kenya had liberalized the airwaves. It was the second FM station to be opened after 101.9 Metro FM. Reggae people, you remember Metro FM? I think Capital FM came to deal with back in the day we had what we call Wanati and Wababi. So Capital, I think it was for Wababi. Metro, I think it was for Wanati. I'm not sure if those things are still there today. So anyway, Capital was a popular station amongst the middle and upper class markets, right? But not always so. It also appeals to the international community via its website, right? So started in 1996. Chris Kirubi purchased it in 1998. He owns 100% of Capital FM. And he says that he wanted to understand the business from the basics. Not just owning it, but he approached the managers and told them that he wanted to host a rock show. And for him to do that, he wanted to become a DJ. And eventually he did that. He got a show. I think he hosted with Italia Maseiro or something. I can't remember her full name. And it was a weekly show, and everybody was happy about it because they wanted to hear a DJ who's also a CEO, who was also a chairman, who's also very rich, doing his thing. And the ratings went through the roof. So kind of like, from what I'm getting right now, Capital FM has over 3 million people who tune in every day. Not sure about the statistics because it comes from guys who work there. But what I have are like examples of people who are able to, let's say, benefit from the ownership of Chris Kirubi at Capital FM. Because under him, the company grew. The media outlet grew. And some of the people who benefit from that: Jimmy Gathu, Caroline Mutoko, I think you know her, Zain Vaji, Farid Kimani, Eve D'Souza, It's Not Homework, Gaetano Kagwa, Nini Washera, and of course, Italia Masiero, the one that he hosted the show with. So anyway, Capital FM was just 5 minutes walk from his office. So I don't think it was that difficult for him to do that. Let us now go to Hako Industries Kenya Limited, right? Hako is a household goods manufacturer, Agenda 4 manufacturing. In 1998, just when he was buying Capital FM, he was also buying Hako Industries. Money. He acquired it for an undisclosed sum, and it was 100% acquisition. At that time, it was a Kenyan subsidiary of a Dutch trading company. So that company distributed American goods and British goods. But Chris Kirubi decided that this thing should manufacture goods as well. and he started manufacturing that, and that was very good, right? So anyway, what happened next? In 2008, Hako, right, it formed a joint venture with Tiger Brands, and it's Chris Kirubi owning 100%. He sold 51% of those shares, a controlling stake, to Tiger Brands for 300 million Kenyan shillings. Again, big money. So he was Tiger Brands is one of South Africa's largest food manufacturers. It's actually listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, so it's a big deal, and that's why it has 300 million to spend. So revenues of Hako Tiger Industries, right, were in excess of $33 million in 2010. That's a whole load of cash, right? And it employed that's in 2010. It employed 700 people, right? Chris Kirubi in total, someday in the, I think around that 2010, he employed 1,000 people, and now he says that he employs over 2,000 people. One guy. Entrepreneurship. When you allow Africans to do their thing without impediment. So everyday items, right? That's what they manufactured, right? Like big biro. I think we all have that kind of biro. There are razors, there are lighters, there's baby food, there's stationery, there's bleach. There's so much stuff that Hako manufactures, right? And Chris Kirubi actually says that 95% of all Kenyans or visitors to Kenya have at one time used at least one of his products. That's a big deal, right? So in 2016, Chris Kirubi earned 714 million from the sale of big brands East Africa, right? He sold it to Societe. Oh, sorry, Societe. Yes, Societe. It's a French company. Yes, Hako held an excessive franchise for big products in the region for about 40 years. So after that 40 years, Societe or something, the French company, right? It wanted to take full control over the big brands, and Chris Kirubi sold that brand for 714 million. Again, big money. So there was after some time in 2017, Tiger Brands, which had merged with Chris Kirubi, the one that had given Chris Kirubi 300 million, it exited from Hako Industries. And why did it do that? Because in 2015 there were some accounting irregularities at Hako, right? And Tiger Brands estimated that the fraud had cost the company 346 million Kenyan shillings. So they had given Chris Kirubi 300 million shillings, but these accounting irregularities had taken 346 million from the company. So they didn't want to stay, they wanted to go away, right? And they did. And that's how they parted ways. Again, even if they parted ways, yes, Chris Kirubi bought his shares, so he maintained Hako, right? And I think right now he owns 100% of it. So let's move from Hako and all the things that it manufactures, including the big. Let's go to Centium Investments. This is now kind of like the big deal. It's a private equity firm. It has a market capitalization of, guess how much? $92 million. Not shillings, dollars, right? And it has stakes like in various companies across the board. They include Coca-Cola, Safaricom, KCB, Almasi Beverages, and Longhorn Publishers, as in the big guns. This guy has stakes in the big guns, the big corporates in Kenya. Centium is listed on the Nairobi Securities Exchange and the Uganda Securities Exchange. The largest single shareholder in that company, guess who? Again, our boy, Chris Kirubi. He owns 30% of it, although Forbes puts it at 27%, right? And guess how much that 70% is worth? It's worth 6.5 billion Kenya shillings. And also Forbes estimates that today at around 10 billion Kenya shillings. Big money. Big money. So that company is headed by James Moria as the CEO. Yes, I'll talk about him in the future, right? But there's a lot to say about him. So Bayer East Africa, again I mentioned that he's a non-executive director there. He owns 45% of Bayer East Africa. It's an agrochemical farm. Now Bayer Group, which is kind of like the international farm, right? Not the local operation, because the local operation is Bayer East Africa. Bayer Group, it was set to acquire Monsanto, which is another international company, right? Multinational company, for $62 billion. Now, because Bayer is acquiring Monsanto at a higher level, right? That means that Bayer operations in Kenya, they have to acquire Monsanto operations in Kenya. So when they do that, and Chris Kirubi, he has 45% of Bayer East Africa, and Bayer is going to acquire Monsanto operations in Kenya, then that means he has a stake in a bigger pie, right? Because now his assets will increase, his operations will increase, and all of those things. And the acquisition of, like the big acquisition, Bayer and Monsanto at the higher level, at the international level, it was completed in June 2018. So I'm thinking Chris Kirubi is kind of like, that was big money. And he didn't talk about how much he got or how much he's going to get. But he's going to get some money, some good money. So let's go to another company. It's UAP Holdings. He no longer has shares in this company. Please remember that. I'm just going to talk about it. It is an investment and insurance conglomerate. It provides investment and insurance services in Eastern and Central Africa. At some time, it was the third largest insurance company in Kenya. And at one time, Chris Kirubi owned 9.5% of UAP Holdings. He was the largest individual shareholder in UAP Insurance. So in January 2015, he announced that he would sell UAP shares to Old Mutual, right? So he owns UAP, right, through Centium. He also owns it directly. So Centium owned 13.75% of UAP. Chris Kirubi 9.5%, right? Guess how much the total is? 7 billion. And that's what he sold. 7 billion Kenyan shillings, right? And that's how much he and Centium received. So let's go back to Centium. Centium has properties because it's invested in Coca-Cola, in KCB, in Safaricom, and all the others, but also invested in property. And one of those properties is the Two Rivers Mall. I'll just talk about this because everybody talks about it. Centium has a stake in this mall, 58.3%. That's the stake in Two Rivers Mall. And yes, that was back in the day. It was going to cede some shares to Old Mutual. I don't know right now how much it owns, because I think it's ceded some shares to Old Mutual. The first phase alone of Two Rivers, it cost $25.2 billion. Again, big money. The mall is said to be the biggest in size in Kenya, and I think one of the biggest in East and Central Africa, if not the biggest. It sits on 100 acres of land. Itself, it's 62,000 square meters. It's big, right? And it was developed by Athena Properties, which is a subsidiary of Centum. So you can actually see how it works. Because there's Chris Kirubi, there's Centium invest in this, and even those guys who build it, it's Centium who's building it. It's kind of like the money is revolving around a central point, and that central point is Chris Kirubi. That's what I'm saying. So Two Rivers has a lot of things. 5-star, yes, it has a lot of things. Office parks, residential apartments, international anchor stores, and it's close to big places or leafy suburbs, including Muthaiga, Runda, and Gigiri, among others. So let's go to another property that he owns, International House. Yes, and that's where his office is. And that office is just 5 minutes away from Londro House, which has Capital FM, where he owns 100%, right? So he owns International House through International House Limited. He actually owns 40 other residential and commercial properties in the city alone. Those are many properties. Remember, he started this back way in the 1970s, in 1971. And the properties right now, they have a value of more than $200 million, not shillings. So Forbes added kind of like his assets, and they came up to a figure of around $300 million. So that's what they put his worth. They say that was his worth. And they placed him at number 31 on the Forbes list of Africa's top 40 richest people, right? So I think he has moved when it comes to that list, because he's been making some serious moves. So Chris Kirubi has a fortune estimated at $220 million, 22 billion Kenyan shillings, as of January 2016, according to Forbes. Now this is a consolidated figure. $220 million, 22 billion as of January 2016. So even when it comes to Ruto's dam, that 21 billion, it's not worth as much as Chris Kirubi is worth, right? Imagine how much fuss we're making about 21 billion and Chris Kirubi is worth 22 billion. That's how rich he is. But then he's not free from controversy, right? And one of the biggest controversies is Uchumi. So let's ask ourselves, what happened to Uchumi? And I'll also ask, what happened to Kenya Airways? So let's start with Uchumi. In 2008, he was chairman of the board at Uchumi. Uchumi was a publicly listed Kenyan retail chain, right? Everybody loved Uchumi. It had nice strategic outlets. It had goods. And it wasn't expensive. It was okay. So, and yeah, people liked it. So he was accused of using his influence, right, to sell a piece of property belonging to the retail giant. And this sale took place without independent valuation or an open competitive process. And that's why guys call him the architect of the fall of Uchumi supermarket. Remember, Haron Moore took some cash away from Nakumatt. And then Nakumatt, boom, it fell. So here is a sale of property, and it seems that it had a significant impact on Uchumi, and then Uchumi started, instability was great at Uchumi, right? So this case that Chris Kirubi was involved, because they took him to court saying that he used his influence unduly. Again, he has influence. He could have MPs arrested back in the 1970s. And imagine his influence at Uchumi. If he did use it, or even if he didn't use it, he still had influence. So the case dragged on for 3 years. Yes, the case was dismissed in May 2011. The judge said that there was insufficient evidence to prove any conspiracy on Chris Kirubi's part to defraud the retailer. So again, there's nothing really to pinpoint that Chris Kirubi did something wrong. Now, you don't know whether he was very clever at doing something wrong or he didn't do something wrong, right? You really don't know. But you can, as always, somebody is innocent until proven guilty. So personally, I'll give him the benefit of a doubt, as I gave him when it came to Kenyatta, as others were accusing him of causing the failure of Kenyatta. Because there's really no pinning down. And who knows, perhaps it's the Kenyan courts that are corrupt, or perhaps he didn't do anything wrong. There is no evidence to show that he did something wrong, or a litany of evidence. Because after Kenyatta, imagine the second case we're talking about is Uchumi. Years later, it's not like somebody we know who's in government. It's a scandal after every month, right? So anyway, just talking about, and for everyone who has done business, you know that when you do business, there'll always be some issues. You haven't paid me. You didn't pay me what I wanted. People have those discussions, and when these guys have this kind of discussions, they have them in court. So being taken to court does not mean that somebody is guilty. Anyway, I'm just trying to say something. Kenya Airways, in March 2015, it had a net loss of 3.4 billion Kenya shillings. In March 2016, this is March 2014, it had a net loss of 3.4 billion Kenya shillings. In March 2015, it had a net loss of 25.7 billion. People thought that was the largest corporate net loss ever recorded in Kenya. But Uchumi was going to surprise us again, because in March 2016, it had a net loss of 26.2 billion. So it actually surprised us even more, as I said, right? And in March 2017, it had a net loss of 10.2 billion. So at least now it's reducing its net loss. So what happened? So this company is making losses, but yet Chris Kirubi bought 2.1 million shares of Kenya Airways in August 2015. So let's look into this mind of Chris Kirubi. The company is making the largest net losses recorded in Kenyan history, but he's increasing his shareholding instead of reducing it by 2 million shares. So you're wondering, how does this guy think? Is it me who doesn't know business, or is this guy just crazy and it's luck that's propelling him forward? Well, think about this. Again, according to Forbes, he's worth 22 billion shillings by 2016, right? And to purchase these 2 million shares, he only needs 11.55 million Kenyan shillings. So you can see that it's not really much of a big risk when it comes to Chris Kirubi at all. It's just pocket change. The same way you actually have cash to spend and have cash to spend on credit, let's say 100 bob or 10 bob, is the same way that he has to spend on 11.5 million. And he'd buy shares. And if it works out, that's a good thing. If it doesn't work out, he has lost only 11.5 million out of the 22 billion that he's worth. And that's why they always succeed so quickly, because they have enough to risk. You try and risk it, I try and risk it, and we can't pay rent. And eventually they have to start selling stuff. But these guys can do it, and it won't even cause a dent. But it can bring in a lot of money if it succeeds. And other investors, they took the same cue. They increased their percentage holding in Kenya Airways by 2.2 percentage points to reach 17.7%. At this time, Kenya Airways has a net capital gain. I'm always asking, net capital portfolio. I'm always asking, who owns these planes? We need to know who owns these planes, because perhaps these guys are not getting cash in terms of what they're receiving from Kenya Airways, but perhaps that renting of airplanes, they're getting a lot of money from that. Who knows? And eventually we all know that the government, through its wisdom, will bail out Kenya Airways at some point or the other. So it's never really that they'll actually lose their money. It's a matter of how much they will return above what they put in. So anyway, Chris Kirubi, when it comes to Kenya Airways, he says that we can save Kenya Airways by investment and not by debt. And we can save it by government support. So he's actually asking for the government to come in. Yet he's saying that, he is asking the government to come in, and he's coming in as a private player, owning more and more of it, and then benefiting from government support. So think of yourself. You own a duka. When has the government come in to support you and to tell you, you know what, you own this duka. Let me give you 10,000 bob to buy stock. Or let me cut your taxes by 35%. So again, these rich guys, they have a lot of money to spend, And they also have the government helping them, right, to succeed. And it's helping them with money drawn from the poor. And you can see where government support ends up. It ends up in the hands of the rich. So anyway, enough of that. What about his personal life, health, and relationships? So Chris Kirubi, right? He has 1.1 million followers on Twitter alone, and he actually advises people a lot through the hashtag #AskKirubi. And even today, just today, 8 hours ago, this is what he tweeted: "Never despise humble beginnings." Again, parents died when he was very young. He had to work, same pair of shoes for most of his school life. And he continues, use those humble beginnings as inspiration for the next thing. Recognize each accomplishment you have made, however small it may be. Very nice quotes. Ask Kirubi. You can follow me on Twitter. It's very, very nice. So, back to his health. In the last half of 2017, he received medication in a top local hospital. I don't know which one. I'm guessing it's Nairobi Hospital, but I'm not sure. For about 2 weeks, medication. And then he flew to the United States for specialized treatment in November 2017. Again, I want guys to capture one thing. Just capture one thing. So, guys will be here advocating for universal healthcare, which actually leads to a deterioration of the healthcare, quality of healthcare, right? And those guys are advocating for it, pushing for it. They would go to foreign countries where they don't have that much universal healthcare, like the United States, right? Or like India, where they don't have universal healthcare, right? Those are the countries where people go for good treatment. But here we're implementing a system that leads to the deterioration of quality healthcare. And when they advocate for that thing, when the money comes out, they are the ones who take it. And they take it through various means. Tax exemptions, they actually take it by stealing, contracts disappearing, all of those things, money disappearing through contracts, and they go for treatment elsewhere. And they still advocate for those kinds of things here. The best pharmaceutical companies are in countries that don't have universal healthcare. So our pharmaceutical industry will drop. Our nurses will keep complaining. So now they have to bribe union officials to keep the nurses down and to keep the doctors down. They have to increase government. Always remember that the things that they advocate for us, they are not really to benefit us. Like the identification system, it's being pushed by Melinda Gates. Let's say population control, again by George Soros, and abortion and all those things, homosexuality being pushed by those guys. They're not really for us. They're not to help us. So anyway, back to this story. So he flew to the United States for specialized treatment in November 2017. He stayed there for 6 months, seeking treatment abroad. People didn't know what was happening, but they saw photos. He was in a bad condition. Something bad was happening. He returned to the country in March 2018. And that's when we learned that he was suffering from acute cancer of the colon. This cancer is a colorectal cancer, and colorectal cancer is the third most common type of cancer. It makes up 10% of all the cancer, cases worldwide, according to the figures that I got. In 2012, there were 1.4 million new cases. So it's a developing problem, and it's more common in developed countries where more than 65% of the cases are found. So it's really more common in rich countries and not in poor countries. That's something to note, isn't it? I'm thinking perhaps we should think about that, perhaps discuss that in future. So that's Chris Kirubi's health. Let's go back to family. He does not have a wife. Simple. He has a daughter. her name is Mary Ann, right, Musangi, and you can see at the back, father and daughter. She is 46 years old. That means Chris Kirubi had her when he was 32 years old, just when he was starting to buy properties in Nairobi and Mombasa. And my question is, where is her mother? What is her name? Why don't we know these things? The daughter owns, right, restaurants. One is called All Pool and another one is Secret Garden. She's a board member of CDN Bank, KREP Bank. She also has interest in Woof, advertising and marketing, and Rongai Sheraton Hotel. So if you've seen those properties, if you heard about them, then you know that Chris Kirubi's daughter is not far away from them. So there's this guy. Guys keep saying that he is the son of Chris Kirubi. I also say that. Okay, I didn't know. From my research, Polycarp Igathe is not Chris Kirubi's son. Polycarp Igathe was born and raised in Ruiru 145. He worked at Hako Industries for 10 years, and perhaps that's where the association between Chris Kirubi and Polycarp Igathe started. I'm not sure, based on reports. Chris Kirubi has a brother. His name is Michael Kirubi. Again, that's the end of the story. Nothing much is known about them. So anyway, this is what I think I'll conclude on. There are a lot of scandals when it comes to Chris Kirubi. I've heard about a lot of scandals, like he likes young women or those kinds of things. So I tried to search for that material and I didn't find it. And my question was is he so rich that he can use the system to get that information outside of the, let's say, the internet or the public domain? Or is it that he never does that kind of stuff? Again, when it comes to Kenato, right, I found that he's not really to blame for what happened, for the failure of that company. When it comes to Kenya Airways, there's no real credible evidence that he conspired to orchestrate the fall of Uchumi, right? When it comes to Kenya Airways, I cannot really pinpoint him down and say that he did this wrong or he did not do this wrong, right? All I can say is that he advocates for government support, and that support only helps the rich, it does not help the poor, right? So, yes, that's what I can say about Chris Kirubi. Thus far, I don't find him as a bad guy. I actually thought that this part I'd call it Surviving Chris Kirubi. And I'll have a litany of bad stuff about Chris Kirubi. And I didn't find anything. And I always report what I find from research to be as truthful as possible. And this is what I found. The guy is not such a bad guy. Life is a game of chess, right? At the end of the day, somebody will say checkmate. And that person will not be you, and that person will not be me. And even for a person who's worth 22 billion, it will not be him. Let us pray that he lives long. He's 78 years. But may he live as long as he can. And may we as well live as long as we can. And may we learn to advocate for things that actually help us. Things that do not put money into his hands or into the hands of other rich people. Systems that would help us. In the same way that they run towards systems that would help them in case of trouble, we need those systems here. We need our doctors paid as much as possible. We need our nurses paid as much as possible. We need as much competition amongst them as possible so that the price can also be low. We need the government out of our lives. That if the rich want to hide information about their families, they want to hide information about themselves, that we can also do the same. But we can't do that. When at the click of a button, every information there is found through Huduma and all those other things. Let us have a rich kind of mentality where we perceive ourselves as rich even though we are not. And we advocate for things that would actually make us even more wealthy, even though we are not wealthy. Or at the very least, things that would not put money into their hands by taking them away from our hands. That is what I had for you today. Thank you for watching. Please let me know what you think. Leave your comments in the comment section below. Thank you to all my 1,143 subscribers. Please subscribe to my channel. Share these videos. Do not hide a light where there is darkness. Pray for me that I may not flee for fear of the wolves.